means being right out there in the middle of Lough Derg in quite a remote place, and it is one windy day today, so it was far too rough for that. So we're now at Drumineer, and the castle really is just gorgeous also. It just means we might have a little extraneous noise from people around us, but you know, it's beautiful. So what we're doing today is we're painting this castle scene. Now the first thing to do as a landscape painter is you want to be very careful not to spoil the landscape that you're in. So when you unwrap your canvas with the plastic or the paper, be careful, especially on the boat. You don't want to be the one person in this whole harbour leaving plastic and paper fluttering around. So as soon as you have a bit of paper in your hand and you put it down, tuck it away into a bag or something. So that's your first tip. Now, the second thing you have to do is to transcribe that view onto your canvas. So how are you going to do that? Well, here's some simple step-by-steps. So in the Irish School of Landscape Painting, what we do is we've broken down the rather complicated business of going out on site with all your equipment and getting these impressions from nature directly into 4 simple step-by-steps. So, step 1. Select your composition. This we've done. That is the composition over there. Step 2, draw it in. This is acrylics I'm using. Acrylics are both very useful in general to block in with because they dry quickly. But when you're on a boat, they really are a godsend, because if you had lots of oil paintings strewn around the cabin by the time you'd finished your week-long jaunt on the boat, you'd really be in a bit of a wet pickle. So first thing is to place the castle. Where is it going to go? It is the main feature of our composition. So the first thing is to decide where that castle is going to go. So I'm going to put approximately not quite halfway across the canvas. So now you could do this in with chalk or with wax, anything you like, pencil. I'm using the paint because I quite often do that, but also because it's easy for you to see. Now you can see if I put the brush there, the edge of the canvas comes just to where the blue is on the brush, and if I move it over, the blue stripe I've put for the edge of the castle comes just before that blue. So that means the space from here to here is slightly smaller than the space from here to here. So it's not quite in the centre. I definitely would avoid putting the edge of the castle slap bang in the middle of the picture. But why? Because it makes it for a more interesting shape. What you want to do is to get the most variety of shapes that you can in on this onto this canvas. Now you can ask me questions through the live chat bar, and we're live at the moment, so you can ask away. I'm sorry, we're live streaming at the moment. Yes. Okay. So there's that on the harbour. There's people around. So there we are. So we're just putting in the second part of the castle. Now, in placing that line, what we want to do is to make quite sure that this shape here, this space here, which is actually an empty space, is also different to all of the other spaces in the canvas. Because if every single shape you put onto the canvas is, well, it's going to be interesting. More interesting than if you repeat yourself. Just like a good sentence structure. Now, so that's the front face of the castle sorted. Now, we want to get the side face, the space that's in the shadow. So let's do that. Now, at the moment, what I'm doing is making kind of educated guesses about this. What I'll do afterwards is to show you how you can check if your educated guesses are more or less what's in front of you. Now, my lines may wobble a little bit because the swell on the boat is tipping me. But even if you have wobbly lines, it's not going to be a big problem for you, because most people have phones these days that take photographs. So just take a photograph, and you can use the detail from the photograph to fill in your exact detail of the composition. Now, so what we all have to do is to begin with a guesstimate. You have to have a guesstimate. You have to have some kind of a starting point. So I'm starting with a guesstimate, and then I will check if it's correct or not. So having got my main parameters of the wall, I'm now filling in the inside part. So what I'm doing as I'm doing this is I'm using my eyes to guesstimate the major proportions, and obviously as you practice this, your guesstimates will tend to get a bit more accurate. It's just a matter of practice, isn't it? So there's my guesstimate for my main shape. Now, the next main shape for me to estimate, would be where the water comes. So I am going to guesstimate or estimate there. Now, let's see how that divides up the canvas. That goes once and a third into the rest of the canvas. Let's see, is it a different shape to everything else? It is. So I think we can proceed on. Now this white stuff that you can see in the palette cam, this white stuff is actually something that dries transparent. It's called acrylic medium. There it is. Acrylic medium, gloss medium. And what it does is it retards the drying and makes the paint a little creamier. So when you're using oils, you use oil as your medium. So when you're using a plastic-based medium, which is the acrylic medium, then you want to use its plastic base. So you can see I'm using that to dilute the paint a bit. But the combination that we have to let's just get the feel of these other buildings in here. The trees. The bushes. So in placing these, I'm trying to again subdivide the canvas so they're all interesting shapes. So you see that's a different length to that. And then the space between this and that house is different to that. The space between this house and this is different. So they're all different. And I think the thing about making a picture yourself outside is what you're trying to do is you're trying to capture the spirit of the place, the feeling of the place. So if I were to have parked over there, which we thought about parking in, I probably wouldn't have seen much of the little house that's tucked in the corner here. I'm not going to put that in for the moment. I might decide to leave it out entirely. We'll see how it goes. So we see we have an advantage over the camera. We can pick what it is that we want to put into our paintings. Now I might just have the building there in a different colour so I don't lose it. As the boat is rocking, it's actually slightly easier to block in the shapes very quickly because the rock of the boat makes the brush wobble on a... I think we might move that over a little bit to here. You see, as you press into the canvas, it's like holding on to the boat rail. You have a little support. Okay, now we're going to have there, and then we have the wall of the harbour. See, the advantage of the acrylic is this is going to and then trees in behind. This is a very interesting castle. It dates from the 13th century. It was originally just what they called a hall castle to begin with. And then in the 16th century, it was expanded to be a tower castle. It was originally inhabited by Thomas Butler in the 13th century. And then later on it was remodeled. Now, so much that you need to put into it. So here we are. So the wind has died down to a considerable extent. When we first came, these trees were really billowing in the winds, but it'll take quite a while for the water to stop being so choppy. And now I've made those trees slightly too tall. Do you see I've made them as tall as the castle? They're actually not quite as tall as the castle. Take a tissue and dip it into your water and remove the top part. Isn't that so easy? So it really isn't a problem to draw in the paint. It's a little more challenging perhaps to have less control and not to be so detailed. But I think that's as much as we need to start the actual painting. Now, if you're doing a picture for yourself, if I was doing this for myself, I might spend a good 40 minutes drawing in the shapes very accurately. But I don't actually need to do that, I think, today, because I think you really like to see the paint going on. But I will show now how you check your proportions are correct. I've just got, this is water I'm using for cleaning the brush off. I've just got some more down on the ground there, just finishing cleaning it. So when you clean your brush, you want to keep it to the shape that it naturally is, to reform its shape so it dries to that shape, and make sure all the paint is out of the ferrule, that's this piece here, then you know it's clean. Now, what I would do is to check proportions are correct. So how to check a proportion? Well, you see the width of the castle. This is the width of the castle here. So I'm going to extend my arm, because the length of my arm is probably not going to change in the next few minutes. I'm going to put my back against the back of the chair, because the chair isn't going to move in the next few minutes. And I'm going to line up this part of the castle with this end of the brush and slide my finger to this side of the castle in reality. So that's what I'm doing now. I'm finding the measure. I would just put that and behold, without moving my finger, I find that the width of this front is the same as the height at the point where this wall is, okay? So now I go to my own drawing, put the tip onto that part, slide my finger to here, rotate it 90 degrees to check that the proportion between the brush and the canvas changes. So you need to find one steady point of reference. So then to find out the proportion of this, I do the same thing, line the edge of the brush up with the edge of the castle and go across 1, 2, 3, 4. So if I do that, okay, so I'm going to make it slimmer. Okay, and actually I think it probably needs to be a bit taller too there. And across we go. Four. It could still be a bit thinner. Do you know what? 1, 2, 3, 4. It's marginal. It's not halfway. Masts. I'm just looking to see how tall the masts are in relation to the... and clean the brush again. Okay, so that's our composition drawn in. Do we have any questions about drawing in the composition? That's stage one. Not too difficult, but we've got 4 stages to get through. So we're going to speed on. I'm just there. Lumps will show through, but I can paint over the smudge. Smudges won't show through, but lumps will. Okay. You just have to do it in the simple step by step. So I'm going to block in each area. To do that, I need to have my paint mixed. So the paint is just as it came out of the tube of elbow grease. Now I want to make a few basic mixes. Mixed with a bit of the cobalt blue. This is cobalt blue. Instead of the cobalt turquoise, if you want. Wouldn't matter which. Check it out. So that's dried quite a lot. So I'm just going to put out some more. The paint in the tubes will vary a little bit by age. So you'll see that this particular tube of cobalt blue is quite viscous as it comes straight out of the tube. It's just because the paint itself is a little aged. So that's the cobalt. Here that being really quite green. Okay, so that gives us a base for the blues. Now if you look in purple with a bit of burnt umber maybe. So the brown just cuts through the purple, making anything like that. Now See, you do a good hefty thrusting jab with it, with a jerk at the end, and it gets it out nice and cleanly. That gives a nice colourful cloud effect, and then this one is just black, which will give make just a neutral grey here. Okay, so you see the time and the care that I take about preparing my palette. But once I have all these colours mixed, I'm going to paint half this picture without having to lift this knife again, because all the colours are delightfully ready for me. So it means that I only have to concentrate on one thing at a time. And a bit of purple mixed with it there. I want to use big brushes. There's a painters and decorators brush, which will work fine. There's a that I'm engaged with at the moment. Now, I'm taking a little bit of the grey. So what I normally do, I would normally paint the biggest areas first. Why would I paint the biggest areas first? Well, very simply, because the sky and the water, the two biggest areas, and they're going to have they're going to have more visual, a smaller surface area of the castle. So these big areas, it's like on a stage play, your main cast, your main characters take up less of the space of the play than all the supporting characters if you count them all in together, but the supporting characters are all there to support them. So that's exactly what the sky and the water, looking to see that the water and the sky are different sizes, because if not, this is the time to change it, and they are just, the water a little bit bigger. Okay, right, now get some more of the greys coming in. So the greys are going to support the castle. So I'm thinking about what sort of colour I want to have behind the castle in order to show it off. So the grey is quite good because it's kind of brooding. A little bit of this mauvey grey from the other palette will help to show the warmth of the stone off. And do you see how easily that covers the mistaken width of the first? Not a problem at all. Now, if you're struggling to get the paint onto the canvas, what I would do is go back to not to keep pushing it around on the canvas. The paint should be your friend. The paint should glide on. It should be a pleasure. It should be quite a visceral experience to use the paint. So if you're struggling with it, go back to the palette and go back to mixing until the paint is nice and creamy and easy to work with. And use water with it only. What water does is the paint. So it's like using terps or paraffin with your oil paints. It just thins it. That's. Now, if you've got lumps in the paint from it drying, I not worry about it at the moment. You can take those off afterwards. Okay, so this is the cold blue. Now, if you look at the base of the sky, do you see the base of the sky tends to feel like it's going away from you? It's a colder blue. It's more like green than it is like a red. And then if you look up at the top of the sky up there, it's really warm. It's like a purple. So if you want to use to make this two-dimensional canvas look three-dimensional, then you want to use colour as your ally. So you warm colours to help take the eye to the distance, the imagined distance, and you use cold colours to get your eye to think of the distance, and you use warm colours to make feeling of it coming closer to you, because the sky, you feel like it comes over the top of you. Okay, now here we have the warmth. This is the ultramarine. Same brush. The advantage of it all being on the same brush is that little bits of what you had in the previous mix are there in this mix. And what that does is it helps you to create a harmonious colour construction through your composition without any effort. The same reason for plates. I paint in the same plate rather than but when you do that, then you have to make everything mix to match instead of it just sort of all naturally running together. I know it may seem a little frightening to have it all on the same plate, because you might feel like you've got less control as it runs together. But if you use this medium and mix it to the creamy consistency, then it doesn't become a problem. It creams together. It becomes an easy to use paint mix. Now that's a little bit of the black going in with it. I know it's a little bit exaggerated from what there is, but it's not exaggerated from what we had this morning, and it makes a dramatic effect which will show up the castle more. So you see, as I'm working, I'm slightly adjusting the tone. So the tone, what is the tone? The tone is the degree of light or dark. If you're watching from America, then you would call it value, probably the value of the colour. Here in Europe, we call it the tone. So it's the difference in light and dark. So imagine it like taking a black and white photograph. When you take a black and white photograph, you see the three dimensions of the face or figure or whatever it is that you're photographing merely through degrees of light and dark or grey. Now, if you use a very light feathery touch, you see how that then can blend together and give the feeling like the wind blowing the thicker clouds over the thinner. Of course, that not really being the right term, the denser clouds, the more rain-filled clouds. As I'm doing this, I'm also bearing in mind which way I want the light in my picture to be coming from. At the moment it's coming from the right, so I would prefer to have the side of my sky and less light on the dark side of the sky, the left side. And you see there's absolutely no trouble layers dry in between and build it up more slowly. So you see, as I'm going and modelling it a bit more and a bit more, and really modelling at this stage I could skip, because the main thing is to get the information while you're on site. The weather seems to have settled to be beautifully sunny, so actually so I'm being careful to put a little bit of light just in that place, so that the face should have a little bit of light behind to throw it forward and effect. But I think we can move on now to the water, because the main deal is very simple painting and decorating, contained in a small space, and also perhaps not perfectly clean, although I have to say it seems to be pretty clean here. I'm using a little bit of green in it. So this is the reason I'm making it lighter than it is now is because I want to have a strip of light coming across here. So I am remembering how it was earlier today, rather than painting it how it is now with the cloud somewhat over it. Now, here I am using the brush to mix, because the paint is already a little bit. Now the water actually has got quite a lot of purpley, even the bit of brown is quite useful. And on it goes. The acrylic is a very forgiving paint. It's really a good paint, both to begin with, and also for professionals. I would frequently for myself begin a picture like this with an acrylic block in, and then work oil over it afterwards. You can't work acrylic over the top of oil, it won't be permanent, but you can put oil on top of acrylic. So we would have a particular technique for doing that, where we would seal in the acrylic and then use the oil over the top. If you don't do that, because the acrylic is quite porous, if you look at it under a microscope, then you can get an unpleasant feeling while you're putting the oil over, because the acrylic will tend to suck in all the oil paint. But you can still do it. It's easy enough to just use a bit of varnish, acrylic varnish, over the top. Now, I'm just using a little more liquidy, with a liquidy, not with water, but with the medium and the flow improver, just to cover in those thin bits there, and to blend. There we go. We just blend it a little bit. That will do for the block in for that. Now I'm just going to check, double check again. I always keep checking. I know you might have a good eye, but it's always good, even with a good eye, to check. Now look, you see that water is exactly the same as the amount of sky there. So while you're blocking in, things can kind of shift a bit, and you also experience it slightly differently when it's actually got paint on it. So I'm just going to bring the water up a little bit with the reflection of the wall. So if I make it up to there, if I make it up to there, then that will be fine. And if I make it up to there, is it half? Oh, that's halfway up the canvas. So you see, it's a fine thing. I don't want it as low as that, and I don't want to come up as high as that. It's just a little bit higher that I want to come, very little bit higher. So what colour will I make it? It's quite dark over there, so my purple is quite dark. And I'll put a bit of green in the purple, so it's not too unrealistic. So just bring it up a little bit. Now, to get a straight line, it's quite useful if you use your whole body. So you see how all I'm doing is swinging my body across while I lean into the canvas. And the canvas itself, because it's moving with the boat, helps to glide your arm across. In fact, I was painting the other day from the boat, and I was painting the waves, and the wind had gotten up and we were anchored, and our anchor was slipping. But it was really quite funny because I was painting the wave tops, and the movement of the boat made the actual wave tops for me. Now, so I'm just blocking in the green there, but of course the green on the front is going to have a light on it. So I'm going to take a bit of yellow. This is lemon yellow. And we'll just have the light part of the ivy coming up here. So this is just establishing its shape. So what I'll do is we'll take this to the finish of the block in, and then in the school what we usually do. So that's to find us. You go to isolp.com, Irish School of Landscape Painting.com. So in the school what we do is we always take a coffee break. It always helps the concentration because there's quite a lot of information to take in. So I'm going to finish blocking this in, which is stage 2, and then we'll do stage 3, which is the chiaroscuro. What it does is it brings the whole picture to life. So this is the basic block in, and then we'll bring it to life after coffee. We have a bit to go. So I'm just establishing geometric shapes, really, aren't I? Now, the bit of ivy that's inside the castle is darker and colder. Can you see that? So that makes it feel like it goes away from us. So this is all part of our illusion. We're trying to be quite convincing with our illusion. And why am I blocking the ivy before I put in the walls? Well, quite simply because there's more ivy than there is walls. And indeed, I'd wonder if the walls would stay up without the ivy. There's so much of it on it. So I block in the biggest area first. I block in the ivy first. So while I'm painting this, my major thought is not, is this ivy, is this castle? My major thought is, what shape is it, what tone is it, and what colour is it? Now, you see, I want to get the silhouette of this dark side. Now, I'm not actually sure if I want to make it that thick or that thick, so during coffee break I'm going to look at that. I might trim it down, or I might thicken this up. So I'll look at that shortly. Okay, now we want the light bit. So cadmium orange, no, sorry, cadmium yellow. You see that yellow comes really towards you. So that's cadmium yellow. This yellow tends to go away from you. That's lemon yellow. Lemon is cold, it's slightly bluey. Cadmium is warm, it's slightly reddy. So the warm one comes towards you. So where I want it in the front here, I use more of the warm one. Now I think I could do with moving to a smaller brush. So let's plonk that brush in there, and let's, you don't want to leave your brush out even for a few minutes in this sun and wind, because it will dry. So I'm just cleaning off this nice big brush in the water, just plain water. I wouldn't use hot water because that will tend to make the paint dry also. Just plain cold water. Get myself a third pot. So if you just have 1, 2, 3 pots, get off the worst, get off the next worst, and then you see, squeeze it to back to its nice shape, and then your brush will serve you for years. Now we want to go to a slightly smaller brush. Now I'm going to go to a hog, just to show you the variety of brushes that you can use. So these are hog brushes, and they're filbert. They're not quite flat, they're not quite round. So we're going to use that. Quite useful for the foliage. And we shall now block in the background foliage. So that's sap green with a bit of the orange and a bit of the yellow. So we're just making very simple shapes to get the trees. The next one, as it comes forward, has a bit more lemon on it, a bit more yellow on it. And what I'm looking for is the canopy, to get the shape of that particular canopy. So it's characteristic of the place. So putting in the tree before I put in the building in front. And then there's another tree in front of that. So make that just a little bit warmer with a little bit more cadmium yellow in it. Then we go back again to the next one. So this one can have some of the cobalt turquoise in it. Makes it colder, makes it go back. And we'll have... Now I remember when we drew that in, I drew it in just a bit too tall, so I'm being careful not to make it too tall this time. And then we'll have a whole bunch of trees going off here. Okay, so we're just doing this in very simple steps. It may look very chaotic to begin with, but that's big lumps, so just get rid of it on the edge of the canvas. So this is lemon with the cobalt turquoise. It makes quite a bright but cold green. You see how rich that green is for the top of the key. I don't mind at all that it goes on to where the key is going to be, because I'm going to paint over it anyway. Now the next thing to do is to paint the walls of the castle. So for this, I'm going to use a smaller Daylon brush. It's a 1/2 inch. It's a 1/2 inch wash brush. It's commonly used in watercolour painting, but if you look after it properly, it's very good for your acrylics too. So this is a bit of that burnt umber and cadmium orange with a little bit of blue that we mixed up earlier, and that's going to give this front face of the castle a little bit of warmth on there. Just figuring out in blocks. I'm seeing in my head all of this in blocks. So you see, when you do this in simple step-by steps, it's not hard to do. What makes it hard when people are trying to paint a picture is when you get too involved with detail too quickly and you get all critical of yourself. You don't want to be critical, you want to be analytical but not critical. So now we get little bits of the wall showing through the ivy here and a bit of light catching up here. So there's a bit of yellow grass at the top there. And then we see this part of the... Oh, we wanted to bring this over, didn't we? Okay, so I've made that a little thick, not a problem. Now, lean into the boat to counteract the rocking. Okay. Right then. Okay, now we want the darker tones, so we go to the more mauve and blue end of this mix that you saw me mix earlier. So this recording is going to stay up on the YouTube channel, and if you miss it on the YouTube channel, just go to isolp.com and you'll find it there. So it'll be up for a while, it's free, and you can watch the recording, you can pause it, you can rewind, you can paint along with it, and or keep pausing it while you catch up with it. So have a go, but don't be too critical of yourself. And do it in these simple step-by-steps. Don't race ahead. So that's a little bit more blue and with the same mix. Okay, and then a little bit more blue again for the really shadow side. I know that's not true to nature. I'm making it a little bit wide there, but I really want to. So I shall look at that, as I say, when I stand back. And sometimes, if there's something about a site that makes you want to adjust it, like leaving out the building there, you know, you don't have to be exact. If you're fortunate enough to sell your picture, it's not necessarily likely that someone's going to come and look at the actual view, and if they do, they may think that you've taken a different point of view on it. Anyway, so feel free to make any slight alterations. You do want to retain the character of the place, but some slight alterations is always within possibility. Now there's another wall that goes back over here. How do I know where it goes? Because I'm looking at horizontal. So there's my horizontal, okay? So I see that wall in the front is slightly higher than this wall at the back. So let's just do the same in reality, and that's how it is in reality. So you don't want the back wall to be the same height as the front wall, because you check your verticals. Then the next thing to check will be that's horizontal. I'm getting confused here myself. Check your horizontals. This is the horizontal. Now to check the verticals, when I come to do the reflection, let's take the same colour I have for the dark there and start doing a reflection. Now, as I do the reflection, I want to... Oh, I got a drip happening. So, easy. Oh, if you catch it in time, it's easy. Just take your damp tissue and remove it. Now, to find out that my verticals are correct, you take a steady measurement and do that. Now, a reflection, the secrets to reflections are that a reflection always happens vertically beneath the object that is reflecting, always. Has to come vertically beneath. So if you want this tower bit, find a steady way of finding where the vertical is and measure down. Now it can wibble wobble a little bit as the water heaves and dips, but it always comes beneath. It couldn't be over here. So the same with the front. Now that's a bit light. Now the other thing with reflections is that your reflection will always also be, the darks will be slightly lighter in the water, and the darks will be slightly lighter and the lights will be slightly darker. In other words, in your reflection, the contrast is less than it is in nature. Now, here we are, we're getting a bit of sunshine, we're going to get a bit of reflection coming in a moment. Now, that's a little bit too light, so I'm just going to get some of the darker colour onto the brush. Okay, this paint is again drying a bit, so taking a bit more blue. In with the paint. Now if it goes somewhere you don't want it to go, then you can very simply deal with that by taking your wet tissue again. So here we go, let's just check. See, that's gone slightly astray there. So just neaten it up. Might give you quite a nice feeling of reflection in itself. If anything is too strong, again you can just lift it a little bit. If you want to get a feeling of the blue coming across, you just lift it. So I'm going to have a little bit more blue in there, a little bit more dark, a little bit more. Oh, paint's getting sticky. Okay, put that into the water. Now we want a slightly smaller brush to block in these other pieces. How are we doing on time? Getting close to coffee time. Not quite. Right, so we're going to use a grey. So we take colour from the grey of the clouds with a little bit of the darker of the building there, and just block in the triangle for the shadow side of the buildings. Again, if the boat is tipping and pitching, then just press in. So the first building is 1 story high, the second building is 2 stories high. Now the roofs, blue with a bit of purple, So another tip for your acrylic paint is to keep the paint in the shadow. A tip for getting a straight line is to, when you're doing a straight line, rest your elbow on your knee and then swing your body from left to right. You may observe, as I'm painting all of this in, that the acrylics dry a little bit darker than they are in reality. They always dry a tiny bit darker. Watercolours dry lighter, acrylics dry darker, just the way they're made. Now, we want the warm light on the front of the building, so that's going back to the mix. Those warm colours, and there's a little bit of bluey grey on my brush already to just tone it down so it sits in the background, and you use that for the front of the building. Now the actual wall that sits in front of that wants to be just a little stronger so that it is it's catching the light, so that it feels that it sits in front. So it's just a little flick of light. Oh, you're telling me I've been painting for an hour? Okay, well I've just about blocked it in. Let me just finish blocking in the last bits, and then we'll go to coffee break. Okay, so this building back here, yacht club, whatever club it is, has quite a cold, shiny, somewhat curved roof. Now, put my horizontal up and I shall see that it comes about halfway down this wall. So it comes slightly lower than I drew it in. So make it a little bit stronger. By the way, you might notice how much paint I'm using, how much actual physical paint I'm using. When you use a reasonable amount of physical paint, it gives your painting a kind of solidity, a kind of, the painting can feel a bit light. So, I always go for having a reasonable amount. Now that doesn't show, even though I think that's the right tone, it doesn't show up very much because it's very much the same colour as the sky. But you see there in reality, there is a line of trees behind. So I'm just going to block in this wall. Darkish wall. And back to the same tree colour. Bit of a hill behind. It's so what I've done in select underneath you to get the essence of a place. And after our 20-minute coffee break, we're going to go on to the chiaroscuro stage. Three come alive, and then after that we'll do the finishing stage if we have time. All right, so I'll see you in 20 minutes. Coffee break now. I'm going to clean up my because the moisture in the air prevents the drying reaction. See you in 20 minutes. quite a good idea. So just take a knife and fairly to the deck of the boat. If they do, a spot of or disinfect, get rid of them. But you see, just the so, for the sake of doing it easy enough. Now, it's only been 20 minutes, but you see, if I had left my palette open in that time, the paint would have continued to dry. So you see what I did. I'm not sure at what point the camera is switched off. I just sprinkled a little bit of water in the bottom of the palette and closed the another, and that moisture inside will have kept them moist. Could you refill those 2 pots of water, please? Oh, I could, but anyway, it's handy if they inside do. There's another thing of water. Okay, right. So we're going to do now the third stage. The third stage is bringing this picture alive. You see what just happened as that flash of sunlight came across the scene. Look at the scene of, see how alive the sunshine makes it. Behind your back. You want the sunshine to bring everything into 3 dimensions. So whenever I get the strike of water, strike of light across the water, I would be inclined to take your brush and to and place that in. Okay, there we go. Some nice clean water. So I'm taking again my number 10. Evening light, so I'm using a little bit of and some cold blue and a little touch of exactly white, and you see the movement in the water there. I'm just going to bring a little movement of the water across here like this. It starts to get a little bit of that golden light coming on it and a little bit of the darker tone in behind. The eye pulls the scumbling effect. Okay, now we want to bring this into the background, and we could use the same kind of scumbling effect onto the wall, but of course with the wall colours. So the idea of blocking in is you take the colours of the existing wall that you've blocked in and you make a variation on that. And now what I'm doing is I'm pushing the brush into the canvas, quite useful as I've said on the boat, and I'm controlling where the main amount of warmth hits. So the main amount of warmth comes up here, goes and explores that little bit, and then is drawn over to the castle. And by doing this, it pulls your eye through the picture. Now, I gather we've had a couple of little drops in reception while we've been streaming. No worries, if you go back to the same place you found the link, we'll keep the recording up there for some time so you can watch the recording, which will be complete, I believe. If not, my technical team will advise me. Okay, so now over here, you see where the light is just flickering on the wall there, and flickering on the just where that boat is going in, flickering here onto the wall of the quayside. So again, control the eye, pull it through, use different textures. So now as we go across here, and it catches on the canvas in a different way. Now, as I go over to the right side, I'm going to use this slightly stronger texture that I used where the strong light is, but I'm going to have the colour not quite so bright in tone. So we get a half tone there. That half tone gives the three. You feel that the castle is going to start coming towards you. Now back to give a bit more light onto the castle, so slightly stronger colour, slightly stronger tone. So that's slightly more of the orange and the ochre, and slightly thicker paint, slightly drier paint. And you see that now coming across the dark that I already put there, makes a nice little contrast. So as we come up to our focal point, we have a stronger amount of colour and tonal contrast, which you'll find is usually associated. The focal point is your centre of interest in the canvas. The centre of interest, in this case, plainly is going to be the castle. Now, for the wall that's way in the distance there, I'm using exactly the same mixture of paint on the brush, but I'm applying it with a little bit less over here for the texture on the front of the long building here, because after all it's a stone-faced building, so it still captures the effect. Same paint because the to use. I love the different effects that you can get with it. So this is more purple, and for those that have been watching our regular streams where we've been studying Impressionism, you'll see that the purple, which is on the colour wheel opposite to yellow, opposite the complementary. So in our regular streams, we've spent the winter studying a number of different artists and techniques so that we could take the landscape painting to a different level. But now we've got to the summer and we're out on the site practicing it, and it's kind of a whole different kettle of fish, isn't it, when you get out on the site and you have. So this is mostly orange and white, just to really bump this up, which I'm probably doing a little bit too much because I'm getting carried away by the light where it is now, which is more flat on to that than it was. So I'm going to modify it with a bit more of that purpley blue and purpley ochre even. So that it's not too strong, but still I get the effect of the crumbling texture of these old walls. Now you see, I'm not repainting everything, I'm adding to what's already there. So the base may have looked very crude, but now it means I can work with a great deal of freedom with my minor changes of light and dark, warm and cold colour, and it means that I can get the most. I might even have a bit of brine with it, just because it will give the effect of the lichens and grasses that grow in amongst the old stones there. So, you know, the castle, it was originally built 13th century, expanded in the 16th century, fell into ruin eventually, but it's been there a heck of a long time, and there's an amazing amount of texture, lichens that we can make the most of. Now, as I build up the textures in these walls, it's going to leave me wanting to put more texture into the water. So really the reason I'm hanging about waiting to do that is I'm waiting for the right spectacular light effect to happen on the water. So I'm keeping a weather eye for that, and as soon as it happens I'll be in there putting that on. Now, we had a bit of yellow across the top there. We might hit that up a little bit for these light grasses. Just a little touch. And as I'm a little bit more carefully at the minor shapes, we've already got the major shapes, but look at the minor shapes. Now, this is one side of this rectangle. This grey-blue is the next bit that goes back, and then this back wall here is also slightly catching the light. Not fully, but slightly. So just a little bit of what we call dry brush across there, where you tickle the paint over the underneath, allowing it to just catch the top threads, so you get a half tone. Now, we've got a little bit of wall showing through here, which actually is a little bluer. I may go back over that with a bit more blue, but for the moment I'm going to keep going with this brush. And at the moment there's a bit of light going in there, but I remember that wasn't there when my sun was coming from the right. So I'm going to put that in. The weather is on. Okay, so this is lemon yellow, cadmium yellow, and as I've come further forward in on the castle, I've moved into using the cadmium yellow, which is that yellow that's much warmer. And now back to the lemon and the sap. So it's quite nice that as the day goes on, your paint does dry up a little bit. So you start with all the very smooth strokes with all the medium in it, and then you end up with this slightly more textural paint, which is quite good for this stage. But you can keep your paint from day to day. So in fact, if you like to look at the site, isolp.com, you'll find that we did a free stream from Mount Usher in County Wicklow last November. And I find that the paint that I used for that, which I left sitting in the car, all wrapped up the way that I wrap it. Now, when I finished with my paint, what I do is I put the one plate over another, like I showed you, and then I wrap it around in plastic bags to keep it. And I left it in the car, and the reason I left it in the car was because it was winter time and I thought the car would be a coolish place to keep it, and forgot about it. So it stayed there all through the hot weather we've had until we came on this trip, and there I find my plates, and which is quite extraordinary that it keeps that long. And then when we were getting the garden into shape for growing all our flowers for our regular stream that we're going to do in about 4 weeks' time, then the warmer you make it. Now this, even though it's in the front of the building, it's still, to us, at a distance, because it's over to the right hand side. I don't want to look at that as much as I want to look at the castle, and so these when the boat is rocking under me. Chiaro meaning light, scuro meaning shade from the Italian. So neither goes in the shade, and you see how that helps to give the 3 dimensions of that particular tree. And the fact that I've used less strong contrast there and colder colours than here means that I get this envelope of depth, 3 dimensions this way as well. See, I can show you this way, which is quite clear. Roof, give it a slightly sharper line, put my brush on rest my elbow onto my knee, helps to give it a steady line. Going to worry excessively about it because that's easy enough to fix in the studio from my photographs when I take them. Now we have a slipway over here that just is useful to mark in while I see it because it might not be so clear in the photograph. We have a 2-tone wall here, so I'm just marking in the dark a bit so I remember it and I can put in the detail from the photograph. This wall here is of concrete, so as you can see, the light is just starting to come across. We're starting to get that effect of light I was telling you about over the water. So let's get that in. So you get the effect of the ultramarine warm across here, but in with the cold. also a little bit of that. I thought you said I had another hour.
No, 8 minutes left.
Oh, I've only got 8 minutes left. Okay. What?
You can go a bit past.
I can go a bit past. I thought he was saying I could go a bit faster, but I'll go a bit faster too. Okay, so here's some Hooker's Green. Sorry, I thought we were going to go for another hour after the break, but apparently not. Okay, so we have Hooker's Green, we have Cobalt Green Deep, and we have a bit of blue, ultramarine blue. So what I'm going to do is just give a little bit of the feeling of this choppy water. Not too much, because we can't have too much choppy water if we've got these still reflections. But just break this dark area up with a similar amount of halftone that I've been using in the background. Now you see the shapes that I'm choosing? The shapes that I'm seeing in the water there. This is where it's very difficult to do this from a photograph, because you just don't have the feel of it. You have all those bits of detail, and the bits of detail and is when you would put in the drawing, you'd put the put in a second. So taking the white, taking a bit of orange, orangey ochre, something that's nice and warm. Wake of a boat coming in you could have. And if you're wobbling a little, and you can lift away the excess. So it's moving. It's as if stuff is to add it in. And then to go with the dark of the waves, have a few of the waves. Just gives that feeling of choppiness. With an ancient church. In fact, it was at Kincora, the place where Brian Boru had his enclosure, which now has a church over the top of it. Now, a few tree trunks, and we want the masts. Let's put in a few tree trunks. That's going to be hard with the shifting water. But it'll remind me the shape of the trees. Really do want it straight. Let's see if we can do it. I'm resting myself, one elbow on my knee. I'm also resting one finger on the canvas. I'm looking to see how tall the mast is. It comes about halfway up the castle to about there. So try to get between a gust of wind and get it in. And one tall one, and then we've got a few shorter ones. Oh, that one's a bit of a wonky mast. I think he needs to get his mast replaced. But at least it reminds me of the idea. Then there's a few yellowy orange ones. Just gives the idea. And again, you can use with the tissue to wipe away the stones that come clearly. They'll always be along the shoreline where the water's lapping up and down, slightly darker bush coming up there. You want to have a bit of shadow from under your eaves. The windows into your windows, and I suspect that Donovan is going to call time very shortly. Okay, do we have any last questions? We don't have any questions, and are we? Do you want to finish, or do I have more time?
We should finish up.
Paintings, four-stage method. So you'll find us on isoappeal.com. This video will be posted up Irish time or 2 p.m.